So we're here at the Red Pill Expo in Montana, and we have a chance to sit down with Jeanette Finicum. She is the widow of LaVoy Finicum, who, as all of you know, was murdered by government authorities in cold blood. Jeanette, your speech was so moving. Thank you for what you're doing, and tell us just a quick recap of what happened and what is happening now. Bring us up to speed on what the status of the case is.
Well, real quickly, my husband was one of the many who went up to Oregon to support the Hammond family. And he was shot 3 times in the back with his hands in the air as they were traveling to John Day, Oregon, where a group of 350 people were waiting to hear their message of property rights and liberty and to teach about the Constitution. And
so what's going on now? I mean, none of these guys are in prison, I guess, yet, not the guys who shot your husband. What's the status? Are they just trying to bury it, or what's going on?
Well, on multiple fronts, I'm hitting brick walls. But we are in the process of a wrongful death suit. I am presently moving forward with that. We have a 2-year deadline, and that's coming up in about 6 months, so we have a lot of work to do. We're determined to move forward in that regard. I'm also working to try to have my cows put back on my allotment. My husband and I purchased a grazing allotment in 2008, and presently I am no longer allowed to be on there, or my cows, and so I have a litigation there as well with the BLM.
And what's the status with that? Is there anything people can do to support you? Is there somebody they should make phone calls to, maybe their congressman? What can people do to back you up here?
I would love for the public support in flooding the calls in Arizona. Maybe Senator Flake's office, maybe if we get a lot of support and let him know about it, he will help us to speak and work with the BLM. Also, I have a legal fund. It's on our website, onecowboystandforfreedom.com, and that would be enormously helpful at this point where the legal fees are quite a bit for both issues.
I was talking to Lord Moncton yesterday. We have an interview with him, and he said he's going to be working on an international commission of inquiry. Have you heard about this, and any thoughts?
Yes, he did mention that, and he's got some really great ideas, and I hope and pray that we can move forward in those areas as well, because we really need to push back in a responsible way to this overreach and to this murder, in regards to this murder and the stealing of our lands in the West from all the different farmers and ranchers and loggers and miners and private property owners as well. There's a man named Joe Robertson who is incarcerated. I believe he's 78 years old, and he's been incarcerated for this last year because he had a water pond on his private land. This is not okay. We Americans need to stand up for these individuals who are in jail, languishing. The Hammond family, it's ridiculous that they are in jail for a backburn for 101 acres. 101 acres is nothing compared to what the BLM has accidentally burned, and then they are not held responsible. They don't have to replace the property that is damaged. There is an inequity of responsibility. We are held to every regulation, every law, most of which are unconstitutionally made. We don't get to vote or have any say in some of these regulations because they're created in-house in these bureaucracies. And so we need to push back. We need to get our elected officials on the ball and getting them to, let's have a fire of the law books. Let's start erasing some of those laws that are unconstitutional. Let's push back and be responsible about doing so, though.
And I mean, I think there's no question that your husband died for a cause he believed in, for what he was fighting for. What would he tell people? What did he want Americans to know? What did he want for the country?
He was for the Constitution in its original intent. He was for his right to exercise free speech, to exercise his right to bear arms legally. He was he was educating people. He wrote a book, and he did this before he met the Bundys. He did this in 2013. And he is a great storyteller. He always has been. And he wanted to write this book to help teach people about liberty, about individualism versus collectivism, about God, about family. And so he went to task, and he got it done in like 5 months, and we finally got it on the market in June of 2015, 6 months before he was murdered. And that was how he was going to attack the whole issue of, how do I wake people up? How do I teach people? How do I get them motivated to be actively engaged in their communities, whether it's in a public office or just serving other people within your community? We used to be a people, a country that served each other, that helped each other, that when somebody was in need, we neighbors went to their aid. And it wasn't the welfare line or the other types of services that our government continues to create. We were helping each other, and no one went without in the beginning.
And so how has the response been? I mean, I just hear the response, you know, for those who weren't at this conference, the Red Pill Expo. I mean, there was tears in every eye while you were speaking and while we saw the video of your husband. What has been the response kind of nationally and in your community and among the people you've been with?
Well, my family, my extended family, have been extremely supportive. And my community, the people in which I reside by, they're wonderful, very supportive. And there's groups all across the country, smaller groups across the country, that have been very supportive of our family and of the Bundys. But there's a lot of work to do, because in some places that I go, you know, there was a lot of people here today that had already heard about my husband, which is great. It's wonderful, because everybody came from all over the country for this event. It was amazing where people came from, you know, Canada and the East. But with that said, when I've traveled around, most of the groups, they have not heard about my husband. The media is such, they don't want this out there. They don't want to tell this story. And if they do, their narrative is completely false. And they demonize a good man and a good reason and a good cause in which they were standing for.
Okay, one more question. You mentioned that your husband, during your speech, that your husband was first and foremost a man of God. Can you expand on that a little bit? What does that mean?
Well, that's just how he was raised. He was raised by good parents who taught him that he had a Savior, and he devoted his life partially to his Lord and Savior. And what I mean by partially is that he also devoted the rest of his time and energy to his family. He served in his church. He served in his community. He served a mission for 2 years. It was who he was. He knew the Scriptures. And in the Scriptures it says to love thy neighbor as thyself, and he took that very seriously.
Well, Jeanette, thank you so much for being with us, and please keep us updated so we can stay on top of the story.